Yeah, so why did Ali decide to build Agentnoon? I think there's a common theme across most founders where they look for a solution to a problem that's burning a hole in their brain. And they keep looking and they keep looking, and then finally they're like, you know what, nobody's doing this, and I think it should exist, so I'm going to make it happen. Not to compare myself to Steve Jobs or anything like that, but like the first computers that Steve Jobs and his partner built were actually for themselves because they just couldn't get good computers, and then their friends bought some and so on. Similarly, the first Tesla was made because one of the guys really wanted an electric car that didn't look like a Prius, right? So in my case, like I had worked across multiple organizations, what were high functioning organizations, and I was always amused to see people working super hard on dead-end projects because the senior team was not aligned on them. And the senior team couldn't figure out who they had, who they needed, and what the status on certain things was to be able to get stuff done. And in my mind, I was like, this is just an entry in a database, or this is just a data point in a table. So why is this so hard to do? So that kind of stuck with me as I was like an engineering manager, then I was like a CEO, management consultant, then I became a CEO, then I became like an exec team member. I quickly looked at it over my career, I looked at it from various angles, and I realized that everybody realizes that this is a pain, but it's nobody's problem. So because it was nobody's problem, it kind of became my problem, and here we are. The three stories that kind of shaped where we are with Agentnoon started out with my first one in my first job, where we had this very complicated workforce planning model to do a large project, and that model drove our bid, and a whole bunch of people were working on it. There were multiple versions flying around. At the last minute deadline, it was kind of like you passed the baton to the last person and they submitted it, and we won the bid. 6 months later, we found out that there was a typo, or there was an error in the workforce planning model, and we had estimated incorrectly by a factor of 50% the effort it would take to deliver the project. So what was like a really camaraderie moment of like passing the baton and getting stuff done right at the finish line became like a really painful exercise of being like, well, why didn't we do this earlier? Why didn't we do this properly? Why was there no version control? So, huge project, we won it. It was like a moment of happiness, and it turned really sour after 6 months because we had such complicated planning to be able to get that done. So that was the first one. The second one was that after a year and a half or maybe 2 years of living and working very frugally with my first startup, we raised a big round, and I was incredibly exhausted. I'd kind of burnt out, so I took like 3 weeks off, and I just did nothing, and I kind of decompressed. And now my intent was, I'm going to take all this money that we have and really build a business that would be like a cockroach, that would still remain frugal, but we would have like unlimited runway technically. And when I came back to the office, I noticed that there was like 20 people walking around the office. And I was like, who the hell are you? And they were like, oh, I work here. So in the 3 weeks that I was decompressing, my co-founder was also decompressing by hiring people, right? And because we hadn't aligned on it, we were like completely screwed, because in his mind, he was like, we've been waiting all this time, let's go hit him hard. And in my mind, I was like, we finally figured out a way to make sure that running out of money is no longer a concern. We're pretty frugal, so if we stay in this like cockroach mentality, we're going to be unbeatable, because at some point we will find product market fit, and now we have unlimited runway. So because we didn't really have a prior agreement or prior conversation or prior thought process around it, I mean, if I was like on my decompression thing and I had like a million like requests for like, this person wants to hire this person wants to hire that person, I would have been able to say no, or hey, hold on a second, let's talk about this. So that for me was another one where I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? Other than just swapping spreadsheets of who you want to hire. There's got to be a better way to do this. Then the third one, my startup got acquired by a European AI company, which was much larger and had much bigger customers. The first week on site, I went there and I met 100 or more people, and there were so many different teams, and there was so much activity going on. And all this time, I was like, what do all these people do, right? I mean, they are busy. They are doing a lot of great work. But I'm looking at the company priorities that the CEO has described to me, and I'm trying to figure out where all of these things fit in. So either there's things that are overscoped, so like a lot of people working on a very complicated version of a relatively simple solution that might be needed, or there's just too many people working on projects that have a lot of overlap, and I couldn't figure it out, right? And I mean, obviously this machine was humming, it was making money, everything was fine, but I had this like really serious curiosity to be like, something doesn't make sense here, and I'm gonna figure it out. And not in the sense that something is wrong, but like, I don't understand how all these teams are organized and how this work is being done to be able to deliver across the business objectives. So I kind of dove in and I talked to people, looked at documents, looked at data, etc., etc. And it took me almost a week to wrap my head around how we are organized, what we do, and how that functions in service of our business objectives. So for me, I was like, this should not take a week of a person spending like 16 hours a day doing, because for every leadership team, this is essential information, and this should almost be available at the snap of a finger. So why does it take like a week of like insane work to be able to get something going, and then why does it become stale immediately? Because people are moving and there's stuff happening and so on. So realizing how hard that was and realizing how important it was the first time I was like, okay, I have the opportunity to use software to compress time. An exec team will take 100 hours to get to the consensus distilled information that they need to make great decisions around who to hire, where to deploy them, how to make sure your capital is being deployed in the most efficient way. And no exec team has 100 hours to go and do that, right? So if I could use machine learning and software to be able to really make that happen like that, like how like when you press a button on your phone and an Uber arrives, something like that, like when you press a button and you see exactly what's going on, that would be pretty cool. So I think those three were my big ideas or stories where I thought maybe there's a company here. Another profound insight is that CEOs have the worst tools, right? So the impact that we want to have is that every CEO has the equivalent of the highest quality caliber tools available to them to make the best decisions given the latest information, right? We talk about the CEO's power, superpower being making good decisions, making them quickly. But they're effectively under-tooled, right? Like, so if an individual contributor has the equivalent of like a MacBook Pro 16-inch with like all the RAM and all the processing power, your CEO is still kind of walking around with like a scientific calculator, right? So what you want to do is you want to be able to let every CEO in the world, regardless of the size and scale of their company, make great decisions by plugging into all the downstream data and simulate out what that means, what the impacts of a decision mean for the first, second, and third order. That is our goal. That is our aim. It's a big, big goal, but I think we're, taking the first steps on the way to getting there.